27 years old and 21 weeks pregnant, Safura Zargar was denied bail for the third time by the Patiala House Court on June 4th. She is a student of Jamia Millia and also an activist. She has been accused by the Delhi police for making an inflammatory speech on 23rd February, which led to riots in northeast Delhi the very next day.
Safura has been accused of multiple offences under the Indian Penal Code, such as rioting, murder, dacoity, sedition, and criminal conspiracy. But most surprisingly, Safura has been accused for unlawful and terrorist activities under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which carries punishments ranging up to life imprisonment and death. When it is a matter of pre-trial incarceration, every minute counts.
Justice Krishna Iyer, in the famous case of Rajasthan versus Balchand, stated that the rule is bail, not jail. In our country, bail is a matter of right. So, when the bail plea is rejected, that too of a student with no past criminal record, who is pregnant and more vulnerable to the prevalent COVID-19 situation, we were naturally curious as to what were the grounds on which the judge had refused her bail. On reading the order, we found the following legal inconsistencies.
Courts must always interpret penal statutes strictly because they take away the liberty of a person. The UAPA is essentially an anti-terror law. It was enacted to combat unlawful and terrorist activities which impact the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India.
आतंकवाद को मूल समेत उखाड़ने के लिए कानून के प्रावधानों की जरूरत है। आप कहते हो कि कानून कठोर नहीं होने चाहिए, हम तो वहां पर भी बैठे थे तब कहते थे कानून कठोर होने चाहिए और टेररिज्म के खिलाफ। ये कानून लेकर महोदय कौन आए? ये कानून 1967 में आया, तब इस देश में कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार थी और इंदिरा जी प्रधानमंत्री।
Which is why offences like militancy, terrorism, secessionist movements and bomb blasts come within the purview of this act. Accordingly, spreading disaffection against India, which is considered an unlawful activity and which Safura has been charged with, must be read in this context. The interpretation of this term must be limited to extreme cases of terror and militancy and should not extend to issues of law and order for which the Indian Penal Code exists. Disregarding this fundamental principle of statutory interpretation, the court has accepted the overbroad arguments of the prosecution and justified the invocation of the UAPA.
If such extreme and overstretched interpretations of law are allowed, India would become a police state where anyone can be branded as a criminal or a terrorist for exercising their right to dissent. Which is why we see that UAPA has been invoked by governments, both central and state, against professors, tribal rights lawyers, researchers, activists, and now students of JNU and Jamia.
Section 43D Clause 5 clearly states that in order to deny bail under the UAPA, the offence must fall under Chapter 4 or Chapter 6 of the Act. These two chapters specifically deal with terrorist offences. The court, not even on a prima facie level, has been able to show how Safura indeed conspired to commit such acts. Instead, it has only found Safura guilty of causing unprecedented disruption, though it does not give any explanation as to what this unprecedented disruption entails, and for blocking a road that is Chakka Jam. Since when has Chakka Jam become a terrorist activity?
Under Section 43D5, the discretion provided to the judge does not mean his personal opinion. The court must evaluate all evidences to reach the decision based on the documents submitted by the police.
The only evidence that the police have submitted against Safura are WhatsApp chats and statements of witnesses.
Speaking of evidence, the prosecution told the court that the police had seized materials like stone, bricks, crates of glass bottles, and 3 slingshots. The police is using this evidence to show that there was a larger criminal conspiracy which Safura was a part of to disrupt the normal functioning of Delhi and overawe the government machinery by force. Whereas Section 15 of the UAPA talks of bombs, explosive substances, criminal force to overawe the government machinery, killing of public functionaries, etc. The judiciary should not plainly accept exaggerated facts and overstretched charges put out by the police as prima facie true. Rather, it should come to its own conclusion by an intensive application of mind and profound scrutiny of evidence.
Safura's lawyers contend that the speech that she supposedly made at Chandba was an entire day before violence erupted in northeast Delhi. For this reason, the violence cannot be attributed to her speech. In response to this, the court has stated that conspiracy does not require presence at the time of violence, which is correct. But let's keep in mind that the only reason that Safura is part of the alleged Delhi riots conspiracy is because of the speech that she made. But the court has justified her involvement through a metaphor, stating that if you choose to play with embers, you cannot blame the wind for have carried the spark a bit too far and spread the fire. But this reasoning is in direct contravention to judgments of the Supreme Court.
In the Kedarnath case, the Supreme Court held that for a speech to be termed seditious, it must have the intention or tendency to create disorder or incitement to violence. In the Rangarajan versus P. Jagjeevan Ram case, the Supreme Court held that the freedom of speech cannot be suppressed unless it poses a danger to the community. But this anticipated danger should not be remote, conjectural, or far-fetched. It should have a proximate and direct nexus with the expression, like a spark in a powder keg, meaning that the violence should have been a direct result of that speech.
But here, the Honorable Judge has said that even if your speech was an indirect, distant cause of the violence, then you can be held responsible for it.
Even if a public protest turns violent, it should not attract UAPA charges.
What you are doing is you are seeking to designate individuals as terrorists in addition to the existing terrorist organizations. In Section 35, you are creating a whole different test of who is a terrorist, individuals involved in terrorism, or he promotes or encourages terrorism. I urge you, through you, to tell the Honourable Minister to please withdraw this bill. This is anti-federalism, it is anti-constitutional, and it's anti-people. It is a very dangerous bill.
The judge, in his order, in principle agrees that the free flow of ideas and dissent through peaceful protest constitutes the foundation of a strong and vibrant democracy. Then, how has this free flow of ideas been equated to committing terrorist acts in Safura's case? This is the question which the High Court will be faced with while deciding her bail. I am Abha Singh, a practicing lawyer in Bombay High Court, a former bureaucrat and a social activist.
And my name is Isha Singh, and I am also a lawyer practicing at the Bombay High Court. I really hope that this video was informative for you and it helped you understand issues with Safura's bail order.
If there are some other legal issues which you would like us to discuss, then do write to us.
Until then, see you next week at The People's Lawyer.